योगिनः पर्युपासति ते ब्रह्माज्ञाम् अपरे यज्ञम् यज्ञेनैवोपजुह्वति. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, very good. This is so difficult, but you read it very nicely, Shashwin. Thank you very much. Vivek Prabhuji, can you read one line and then we repeat? It is okay. Any?
Hare Krishna, Mataji. We are on 25.
Yeah, text 25, Bhagwat Gita, chapter 4.
Okay. Devameva pare yagyam.
Devam eva pare yagnam. Everybody repeat, please, so that this is a learning experience as well for us. Yogi. Prabhuji, continue.
Naha yogi naha paryupasate.
Yogi na paripasate.
Brahmanava pare yagyam.
Brahmagnavabare yajñam
Yagyena vopajuvati.
yajñenajuhvadi.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much. Rachel
Hare
Mataji,
Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Rachel Mataji, would you like to repeat line by line? Mataji, unmute and repeat line by line.
Daivameva pare yagyam.
Devam
Daivameva pare yajñam. Yogina paryupasate. Yoginah paryupasate. Brahmagnava pare yagyam. Brahmagnava pare yajñam. Yagnenaivopajuhvati. Yajnenaivopajuhvati.
Hare Krishna. Let's do word-to-word
Hare.
translation. Hare Krishna devotees, thank you for joining in. Prashanta Mataji is a little delayed. She has communicated. She'll join us. She's not feeling very well. She's currently taking treatment for a very bad back. So just be patient. We are just on Bhagwat Gita, text 25, Transcendental Knowledge, text 25. Okay, Lata Mataji, let's do the word-to-word. Daivam.
Hare Krishna. Daivam. In worship demigods.
In worshipping the demigods.
Eva.
Eva.
Like this.
Like this.
Apari.
Apare.
Some others. Yajñam. Sacrifices. Yogina.
Mystics.
Mystics. Sorry, Mataji.
It's okay.
Paryupasate. Worship perfectly.
Worship perfectly.
Brahma. Of the absolute truth. Agnav. In the fire. Apari.
In the fire.
Others. Yajñam. Sacrifice. Yajnana. By sacrifice. Eva.
Yagneya.
by sacrifice. Eva
Eva.
10
Well.
उपजुपति
Pajuvati.
There. No, water is there.
Papa.
Oh, yes, please,
Hare
please. Oh,
Krishna.
yes.
Hare Krishna.
Oh, sure.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Danvat Pranam. Hare Krishna Mataji Prabhu. Danvat Pranam. Hare Krishna. Can you hear me? Lata Mataji, can you hear me?
Hari Hari Bol.
Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Thank you very much, Mataji, for joining in today. In spite of your very, very bad back,
Oh, he
we
will come
offer our
back
humble
again.
obeisances from all over the world. Thank you, Mataji, for joining. How is your back, Mataji?
My back is not very good. My back is not great. What to do?
Very sorry, Mataji. Feel free to relax in the group when you are talking. If you need to
Okay,
relax,
I will
please.
do a small kirtan
Don't
and
let
then we
pressure
start.
be upon you. Okay, Mataji.
Jaya Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Jai Shri Shri Radha Madhav ki Jai.
Jai.
One second. These two things have to be the wrong thing. And I'm really worried if it's bent also this chair. Actually, these chairs are really. No, I need these two things in parallel. These two, so I can put my feet on. So push around the cross. Yeah. Good. ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनाशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टां स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम् जय श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे वांशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः मुखं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारिणम् I need my there on the bed. So welcome everybody this evening for this Bhagavad Gita class. Today we are studying chapter 4, verse number 25, the beginning of a new subsection within the 4th chapter. I remember last time I was lecturing, it was chapter 18. And in that section, 18 to 24, we were studying karma yoga, and basically how to perform action which does not bring karmic reaction. We were studying karma, akarma, vikarma. Actions, so akarma, actions we do not bring reactions. And the whole idea is that one has to perform sacrifice to the Supreme Lord. This is what will get us rid of the karmas. We perform activities that we offer to the Supreme Lord. So now in 25, we are entering a new section, which is going to describe sacrifices, different kinds of sacrifices. And the idea of sacrifice is that sacrifice, which is of course performed according to the Vedic injunctions, it leads to knowledge. The result of different yagyas is knowledge. So, so the first verse, but there are different types of sacrifices. You know, the Vedic instruction is always according to Varna ashram, different Varnas, different ashrams. They have different duties and they perform different kinds of sacrifices. So today in verse 25, we are hearing of the sacrifices performed by the karmis or the bhogis, those who want to enjoy. They also sacrifice, but their goal is to gain more enjoyment. And we are hearing today of the bhogis, the enjoyers, the karmis, and the impersonalists. They also perform sacrifice. So let us hear the verse. Devameva pare yajnam yoginah paryupasate brahmagna pare yajnam yajnene pajuhati. Some yogis, because yoginaha, so we're talking of yogis, some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them. So this is the first two lines. Devam, devam, devam eva apare yagyam. Some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them. And some others, they offer sacrifices in the fire of the Supreme Brahman. So in the previous section, we have actually described the system of performing sacrifice to Lord Vishnu. But in this verse, it's something different. Prabhupada says in the purport, as described above, meaning in previous verses, a person engaged in discharging duties in Krishna consciousness is also called a perfect yogi or a first-class mystic. But there are others who also who perform similar sacrifices in the worship of demigods, and still others who sacrifice to the Supreme Brahman or the impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord. So there are different kinds of sacrifices in terms of different categories of people. So here when it says some yogis perfectly worship paryupasate, some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them. Who are these yogis who perfectly worship the demigods? The worship of the demigods usually is done by less intelligent people who have not yet come to the conclusion that there is one supreme Lord. In the purport, they will be called Bahu Ishvara Vadi. Bahu Ishvara Vadi. Those who are followers or worshippers of many gods. Usually, this is how India is represented in the world at large. You know, they think in India people worship many gods, and people are rarely aware that actually in India there are not only worshippers of many gods, but there are also worshippers of the Parameshvara or the Supreme Lord. So the Vaishnavas. But this verse doesn't talk about the Vaishnavas. So who are these yogis who worship the demigods? They are people who want material happiness. Why do we worship the demigods? Usually they are worshipped for material reward. So those who haven't understood the purpose of life, who are not awakened to spiritual consciousness, it is actually advised in the Bhagavad Gita that they should worship the demigods. So by this system of sacrifice, they avoid sinful reactions. So this in search of material happiness, they worship the demigods. And then some others offer sacrifices in the fire of the Supreme Brahman. This refers to the impersonalists, the Gyanis. So here we have the Karmis and the Gyanis. The Karmis worship the demigods for material benefits. They are ignorant. And the impersonalists, they worship the impersonal Brahman, and their goal is liberation. And what the liberation means for them, for a Vaishnava, liberation means muktir hitva nyata rupam swarupena vyavastitihi, means giving up the gross and subtle bodies which are currently covering our consciousness, our pure consciousness, giving up these gross and subtle bodies, and uncovering one's spiritual form, one's original spiritual form. That is called mukti. When the original spiritual form is uncovered, that is called mukti. And with that spiritual form, which possesses spiritual senses, with that spiritual form, we can enter into the Vaikuntha atmosphere. We can enter into the variegated spiritual world, which is described in the Shastra as lying beyond the Brahmajyoti. And for this, one has to, giving up the gross and subtle body means giving up the false ego, the false identity that we believe ourselves being this body, being this mind, and the root of that being that we believe ourselves to be God, in the sense that our psyche is that of an enjoyer, which is not what we are originally. We are the enjoyed. We are the precious servant of the Supreme Enjoyer, Parameshvara, the Supreme Lord. We are meant to serve Him. We are not meant to enjoy separately. We are meant to enjoy His prasadam. We are meant to serve Him. So the Vaishnavas believe that ego is actually eternal, but there are two sides of it. One is false and one is real. So the Vaishnavas believe that when we give up the false ego, we actually can acquire a real ego, a real identity, which is that of being a servant of Krishna instead of being an enjoyer of Maya or of the material energy. So this is the Vaishnava understanding, and this is what Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita. But the less intelligent, number one, do not understand that they are the soul, and they do not understand that the purpose of the soul is to return to its original nature in the company of the Lord in the spiritual world. So therefore they look forward to enjoying things in this world. And they follow the Vedic system of sacrifices to the demigods. The Vedas, the Chaturveda, are highly in quantity dedicated to the worship of demigods, such as Indra, Agni, and so on, for material benefits. And then the impersonalists, we said, they understand the concept of being spirit. They know that. They are the Jnanis. The Jnanis understand they are not this body. Aham Brahmasmi, they say. I am Brahman. Brahman means transcendence. I am made of a substance which is different from the material elements. So this is knowledge. This is the beginning of knowledge. But they are not ready for submission, because accepting the Lord as the supreme enjoyer and accepting that we are a part of him, that includes that submission. And impersonalists, maybe it's either they are beginners in spiritual life and they are not averse to the Lord, but they haven't yet understood his presence. And so they worship the impersonal aspect of the Lord. The Lord has both a personal and an impersonal aspect. So they worship the impersonal aspect, either because, I said, they are not fully evolved in their understanding of the absolute truth, or because they are die-hard, independent-minded people who don't want to submit. They don't want to be a dependent entity. They don't want to submit. They don't want to serve. They are rebels. And they find that actually we can get rid of all the miseries of this world by getting rid of this body, getting rid of the mind, and just getting rid of it and merging into the effulgence, which is known as the Brahma Jyoti. So they try to merge into the Brahma Jyoti by performance of sacrifice, which is of a different type. We are going to read now what Prabhupada says in the purport, that there are two types of sacrifices. All the different varieties of sacrifice can be placed within two primary divisions, namely, one, sacrifice of worldly possessions, and sacrifice in pursuit of transcendental knowledge. So, in other words, either one will sacrifice material things. Everyone has possessions, some kind of possessions, especially those who are karmis, who work, who do business, or whatever. They have possessions. So the karmis, they sacrifice their possessions and they give in charity. They spend money for yagyas, for rituals, for the worship of the demigods in general. And they sacrifice their possessions in order to get more possessions. That's usually what they do. They go to the temple, they give 1 lakh of rupees because they want 10 crores. horse, or they give 10 rupee coconut because they want a new house. So they sacrifice some possession with the idea of getting more. We can also sacrifice, but the previous section told us that we can also sacrifice possessions to the Supreme Lord with the idea of pleasing him. So that's a different category, but still it is sacrifice of possessions. So we can sacrifice our possessions to the Lord as well. And the result of that will be transcendental knowledge. This is what has been advised. So this is the sacrifice of possessions, either under the karma section or under the karma yoga section. And then there is the sacrifice, which is called sacrifice of the self. The sacrifice here, it says, in pursuit of transcendental knowledge. Prabhupada says in the end of the purport, for the impersonalist, the fire altar of sacrifice is the Supreme Brahman, and the offering is the self being consumed by the fire of Brahman. So the idea is that the impersonalist, through contemplation of the world, through study of the Upanishads, and through contemplation, they try to disidentify themselves from their material designation, from their false ego. They are trying to, I think, I am not this body, I am not this mind, I am not anything, I'm not this, I am not that. In fact, their system is called neti, neti. So they are sacrificing, in the sense, to sacrifice means to give up. So they give up their identification, their designations. They are trying to get rid of all the coverings of false identity through contemplation and through study, through meditation. And their goal is to merge into the transcendental Brahman, the impersonal Brahman. The Prabhupada said their sacrifice is the sacrifice of identity and the sacrifice of time also. They invest their time in contemplation, in meditation. We already studied this, that it's not it's more intelligent in one sense than the intelligence of the karmis, but it's not complete intelligence, because they are missing out on the complete realization of complete self-realization. Self-realization means we are originally Sat, Chit, and Ananda. And merging into the effulgence of the Lord only gives us a realization of the Sat. So an impersonalist who at the time of death manages to get rid of all his material identification, enters the Brahma Jyoti on which he is meditating. And once he reaches there, he has no more material body, means he has no senses. He cannot see, he cannot smell, he cannot taste, he cannot hear, he cannot touch. And he has no senses of action as well. So he cannot walk, he cannot do anything, he cannot speak, cannot communicate, right? All these functions are gone. And the mind is also gone, because the mind is also part of the material elements. So he also cannot think anymore. And in one sense, this is a state of bliss. Sometimes we hear of Brahmananda. The bliss of merging into the Brahman is called Brahmananda. What is this Brahmananda? It's the absence of material tribulations. because whatever comes through the mind and senses, although some percentage can be called happiness, but there is also a greater percentage, usually, depending on the people, but in general, there is a great percentage which is in the form of suffering. So when we have no more material body, imagine you are free from hunger, you are free from fear, you are free from sleepiness, you are free from everything. You are free from greed, all these things, the calm, krodh, lobh, matsaya, everything. You are free from all these things which live in the mind. So you are free from all this. You are free from torturing emotions. We know what are torturing emotions. All day long, these emotions are disturbing us. You become angry, and then you become overly affectionate, and then you just go from right to left with your emotions, depending on how strong your intelligence is to keep the mind straight. So impersonal liberation means none of these things. What remains? Consciousness, awareness. I am. What am I? That I don't know, but I am. So there is a sense of being, there is a sense of eternity, because the Brahmajyoti means it is manifested by the Sat potency of the Lord. So therefore is I am eternal. This is the realization, actually. I am eternal. Wow. It's like freedom from all tribulations. No disease, no toothache, no headache, no anxieties, no past, no present, no future, nobody to take care of, nobody to bother you, no phone calls, nothing. Everything is gone. And who is there? Only me. So for a little while, it feels good. But for eternity, it feels like it's a long time. And Prabhupada said that the soul is not completely, cannot be completely satisfied in that situation, because the soul is experiencing Sat. But the soul is Sat, Chit, Ananda. So the Chit and the Ananda are not being, like, they are not developed, or they are not experienced, let's say. So impersonalists that begin feeling a sense of dissatisfaction, which is usually born from the lack of activity. There is no activity in the Brahmajyoti. If you ask the question, oh, how nice is it here? If you could ask the question, what are we doing next? And the answer that would come is nothing. And you would ask this, for how long? And the answer would be forever. You will be doing nothing forever. So the soul experiences some frustration and comes back. Impersonalists usually do not go further. They cannot, from the impersonal Brahman, go further usually. They come back on the material plane and they start again. They start again trying to elevate themselves, trying to realize the truth. So this is the sacrifice of the self, which is talked about here. It's in the second two line. Brahmagna vapare yagyam yagye levo payuchati. So they sacrifice their own material identity, but they do not acquire a spiritual identity. So better than this is the Vaishnavas. Just as one can sacrifice one's possessions just for material enjoyment, and one can sacrifice the possessions for the sake of transcendental knowledge, for the sake of pleasing the Lord and getting closer to Him. Similarly, one can sacrifice one's material designations to merge into the Brahman and become an independent soul, liberated soul. Or one can also sacrifice one's material designations to engage in the service of the Supreme Lord. It's also a sacrifice, and it's the same sacrifice, the sacrifice of the self. Devotees also sacrifice the material side of their life to give time to devotional service. They sacrifice sometimes we send, people become devotees, they just go and distribute books. Oh, how to do that? They have to sacrifice sometimes their shyness. They have to sacrifice their, lack of confidence. They have to sacrifice all their material attachments. How can I do that? I remember Ravindra Swarup Prabhu, one of Prabhupada's disciples from America, saying that the first time that he saw the devotees doing Harinam on the street, he had read some books, Upanishads, and so he was familiar with the philosophy. But when he saw the devotees on the street doing Harinam, dressed with, this particular dress which was unknown in the Western world. They were wearing dhotis, kurtas, saris, and that too was the beginning of the movement in which they didn't even have cloth coming from India. They actually were wearing cloth bought by the meter in shops, and it looked very stiff, and it looked like they were wearing bed sheets. And many times the devotees themselves, they used to refer to their bed sheets or their clothes to be like bed sheets. And so he saw the devotees on the street wearing these strange Indian dresses, and usually having like one green shoe and one red shoe because they mixed up all their shoes, or without shoes, and they were like blissfully deambulating the avenues in the streets of America, and they looked like they were in bliss, and they were jumping and dancing and approaching people with books. And Ravindra Swarup was looking, and he was thinking, you'll never catch me doing that. This is what he was thinking. You'll never catch me doing this. It was beyond. Is that how can I do this? How can I do this? Like, I was born in a respectable family. He was a very intellectual person. I got this PhD, that PhD. I was born in a respectable family. I like the philosophy, but I don't think I can be that. I can't just walk down the streets dressed in bed sheets and just like jumping like this and look so weird. But he did. He sacrificed. He sacrificed his material identification, and he became a devotee. So, and he had to overcome this, initial like, oh my God, I can't be this. It's like, and it takes actually a lot of courage. The first time you go on Harinam, nowadays there are many less Harinams, but going on Harinam, you have to take a step. to stand as a devotee in front of people in the street who may recognize you. Hey, where are you going? What are you doing? It takes some courage, and it takes a shift in identity. You have to sacrifice your material attachments. People who are rich who come to the ISKCON temple, when they serve prasadam, they have to sit in the line on a small, simple carpet. They have to sacrifice their identity. And they do. They do. So we have to sacrifice our attachments. But the devotees understand that it's not that you lose your material identity and then you just become nothing. No. We become, from the idea is false ego means Purusha, enjoyer. It's not our position. And real ego means servant. So that shift has to take place. And when we become a servant and engaged in the service of Krishna, sacrificing all our attachments, sacrificing our spirit of enjoyment, when we become a servant of Krishna, then gradually, not only we lose our material identification, but we develop a spiritual identity. And this is the goal of all sacrifices. The goal of all sacrifices is transcendental knowledge. And what is transcendental knowledge? You know, first you get to know you're not this body, and next you get to know what you are. You are a servant, and you go further. Which servant? And the top transcendental knowledge is to reawaken one's forgotten relationship with Krishna, and ultimately to see him, to meet him, and to resume one's engagement in the spiritual world. That is topmost transcendental knowledge. So as devotees, we also follow this process, because Prabhupada will say, Krishna will say that the sacrifice of the self is higher than the sacrifice of possessions. So we see in our movement also, though we practice at the level of bhakti, which is higher than karma yoga, but you can see when people become devotees, many people, Prabhupada said, you can give your money, you can give your time, you can give your intelligence, or you can give yourself. So many people choose to give their possessions to ISKCON. They give donations. They keep giving donations. But they don't actually come forward to serve actively. Or they don't give all their money. They give some. But others give everything and join the ashram and wear bed sheets. Finished. No more possessions. They've given everything. And when they do that, they don't just give everything. They give their self. They give their own self in service. They give up their ego. They are no more at all living in the world of karma. They are living in the world of bhakti. So all these stages are existing within our movement itself. That some will give their possessions, and some will actually give their time, and some will just give their life. And everyone is rewarded accordingly. So this is the system of sacrifice. But whatever one gives, it is good. Because the result of all the sacrifices is transcendental knowledge, which will grow more or less quickly according to what we sacrifice. If we sacrifice something more valuable, then the reciprocation will be also more valuable. So, Prabhupada in the end of the purpose says the Krishna conscious person like Arjuna, however, sacrifices everything for the satisfaction of Krishna. And thus all his material possessions as well as his own self, everything is sacrificed for Krishna. Thus he is the first class yogi, but he does not lose his individual existence. So this is the perfection, is to acquire one's spiritual identity. And this is the ultimate result of sacrificing things for the benefit of the Lord. But worship of the demigods is the beginning. It is the beginning, however, it's not meant to stay there. It has to be given up, and one has to turn to the worship of the one and only Lord. Whether you may call him whatever, there are so many. The Christians call him the Father, the Muslims call him Allah. And in the Vedas, he is known by the name Vishnu, Krishna, Govinda. It's the same one, the same person. Okay, any question?
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you very much. I beg your indulgence, Mataji. Can we leave the questions for next week because I'm concerned about your back? People
Yeah.
can write their questions on the chat, and I promise next week we can take the questions. Please.
We can take one question maybe, so at least one
Okay.
person is happy.
Okay. So we have one question on the chat. Hare Krishna Mataji, since we all materially and spiritually are part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there should not be any difference in sacrifices because ultimately we all are working for him knowingly or unknowingly.
Yeah, that is true. That's what I said, that all sacrifices are beneficial. All the sacrifices are beneficial. All the sacrifices lead to elevation. But still we should know what is the goal. And we should sacrifice for that purpose, to attain the right goal of spiritual emancipation. Because everyone performs sacrifices. A family man is sacrificing for the sake of his family. A mother is sacrificing for the sake of her children. So everyone is doing sacrifice. But the topmost sacrifice is the sacrifice which is done to regain one's original identity. And one who does that will be actually serving everyone, will be serving the whole world, because he will be distributing the message of Krishna consciousness, either verbally or by just the way he is, by his example, within the family, within the society, and everywhere. Everyone follows my path, Krishna says. Everyone follows my path. They are all searching. We are all searching for Krishna. Everyone follows his path. Everyone is searching for him. But depending on the type of sacrifice that we perform and the purpose that we are entertaining, Krishna will reciprocate accordingly. Is that okay?
Hare Krishna Mataji, yes, Pradeep Singh Prabhuji is quite satisfied and he says thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Mataji, I think I'll hand over to Path Prabhuji now. And anybody with a question, please ask and I'll write it down and we can take it up the first thing next time. You can
Yeah,
either
I apologize to everybody. I have a little crisis in my back, so it's a little difficult to sit up for a long time.
Hare Krishna Mataji, please don't apologize. Please take our apologies, because in spite of the bad back, we are asking you to give us this class. So we are really grateful. Sorry, I'm not able to put my video on, Mataji, because the connection is quite temperamental. As soon as I put the video on, everything goes haywire. But please accept our apologies. And thank you so much for joining us in spite of the bad back. Path Prabhuji, please let's close this session because Mataji is very uncomfortable. I can see that.
Yes. Hare Krishna. Dandavat Pranam Mataji. Yes, Mataji. Dandavat Pranam Mataji. Sorry, we don't. You are giving your precious time us in spite of her bad health. So we are not taking too much lingering time. On behalf of ISKCON Eldoret and all the devotees join in Zoom class, we are grateful and thankful to you. Please unmute everyone and chant Hare Krishna mantra once for glorification of our grace. Prashanta Mataji, please join. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare
Hare. Our grace Prashanta Mataji ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hey.
Hare Krishna.
Vancha kalpatarubhyasya kripa shritanjaya patitanam pavanebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna, Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Path Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam to you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Bol.
Hare Bol. Mataji, please lie down now.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
बोलिए भाई सॉरी मेरा थोड़ा सा जूम क्लास में था